Okay, good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us for our fourth and final informational meeting on the April 2020 No Tax Increase Bond Program. Appreciate everybody joining us. I know you're all very busy people, and anytime you give us some of your time, we are grateful. So thank you once again for joining us this evening. I have a couple people here to help me talk through the particulars on the bond program. I am Dr. Mike Reich, Superintendent of Schools. I also have with me Dr. Jay Harris, the Executive Director of Facilities and Operations, and Laura Hewlett, our Director of Communications, who is also known as the voice that you hear on snow cancellation days. So Laura's glad to be here in a different capacity. And so to get us started, we're gonna watch a brief informational video, and that'll be kind of the base information, and then we'll drill down from there. So let's go ahead and advance to the video, Laura.
Yeah, we have some attendees kind of rolling in still. I don't know if we want to wait just a couple of minutes. I can see we have 26 that have logged on so far, and I know we had about 35 or so that had registered.
Sure. We can wait and let people get established, and then roll the video.
Okay. We now have 28. I don't know.
Let's give it another minute and see if we get to 30, and then we'll pick it up.
Okay.
How are we looking now, Laura? You're on mute.
29.
Still 29?
Yep.
All right. Well, I want to be respectful of everybody's time. Many folks are here and waiting. So let's go ahead. Once again, my name's Dr. Mike Reich. We have Dr. Jay Harris, Executive Director of Facilities and Operations with us, and Laura Hewlett, Director of Communications. And we'll start with this brief informational video for a base knowledge that we will drill down on later in the presentation.
This coming April 6th,
between staff, collaboration with students across disciplines, and with the way the building is structured, we're very physically far apart from each other. And I think the rebuild will really allow us to address that.
You know, when this high school was built, it was built for a smaller population. The hallways are narrow.
there's a loop in some areas, but then it's just a horseshoe here.
The cafeteria does not service the student population.
As the numbers go up, we've got to be able to provide the same environments and learning experiences we had when we went to high school here.
I teach currently in a room that doesn't have a sink. So if you walked in my room right now, you would see 2 tubs. One's the clean water, one's the wastewater. We make do, but it's not ideal.
So we have taken a step back and looked at this high school comprehensively. We dug into the building with architects and engineers. It made more sense to do a phased rebuild than to do a renovate replace.
Some of the deepest and most meaningful relationships that staff members can build with kids are built through athletics and activities. There are a lot of areas that I feel a school district our size really needs to improve. Probably the most obvious is our gym space in our high school. It's tough for us to host some of the bigger events. Just another way we can promote all the great things we're doing at Platte County.
I think a new middle school in this area would accommodate the overcrowding that is happening at the elementary school. It would also provide more adequate and equitable facilities for our middle schoolers. This facility is a nice facility, but the library is kind of small. The cafeteria definitely is small for middle schoolers. It's just not the most ideal learning environment.
Most of the teams from here are bused up there to join the middle school teams, which is okay. But when it comes to games, when it comes to being able to host things down here, it doesn't work as well.
While the 14 miles will never change, I think investing down to the south end, I think that'll bring us closer together.
What we do matters. Facilities matter.
I really think that this is a chance for us with this bond issue to allow our kids to have that continued success. And this is an opportunity for our school district and our community to come together and to make that happen.
Okay, so we did get the message that the audio was not on for about the first third of the video, I would say. Rather than play the video again, I'm going to direct you to our website and you can watch that video another time. Laura, can you let them know where they can find the video on our website?
Yeah, and I'll send a link directly to the video.
And where can they find it on our website if they want to look there?
Oh, under the strategic plan channel, in the orange bar, strategic plan, and then April 6th, no tax increase bond issue.
Okay, thank you, Laura. And I should mention this time, some of you have found your way to the Q&A tool at the bottom of the screen. That is where we would like you to ask your questions. If you have questions as we're going along, put them in there. We will answer questions at the end, and appreciate your attention to that. And so the video really was a 40,000-foot flyover, a high-level overview of the projects, as told by many of our staff members. So do check that on our website or the link that Laura will send you. But we're going to dive a little deeper into the projects. So first, what I'd like to say about the projects is that the projects were determined through a process with a long-range facility task force, and that took place from roughly January 2017 to March 2019. So over the course of about 2 years, we had 13 sessions, plus since then we've had annual review meetings. This included building tours, public feedback sessions, a survey. We've done also included board approval, and so ultimately, the program that is before you is something that we vetted thoroughly and carefully. We also did that with a task force that consisted of patrons that represent different areas of the district. So north, south, east, and west was represented proportionately. And so that process was a long process, but produced the bond program projects that we are talking about tonight. And so to reiterate the projects themselves, first, new middle school, number 2, on the south end of the district, roughly at Platte Purchase and 152 Highway. This will be a comprehensive middle school, and I'll let Dr. Harris talk a little bit more in detail about that. The first phase of Platte County High School rebuild, and so we'll go into deeper detail on that, not only what we're planning to do, but why we're planning to do what we're going to do. improvements to Berry and Pathfinder to allow for each facility to accommodate kindergarten through 5th grade in each facility, and then district-wide upgrades, safety, security, and technology. And so the why behind these projects, what we're going to do or planning to do. So the question is why? First of all, we're one of the fastest growing school districts in the state, so we want to make sure that we provide the necessary educational space to accommodate projected enrollment growth. And our most immediate need with regard to enrollment growth is on the south end of our district, and that is why we are planning to build a new middle school on that property mentioned earlier, and which will vacate Berry, and then we will retrofit that building to be a K-5 elementary school. So that will help us with our educational space. We want to address facility equity challenges. This new middle school will give us an opportunity to build a new comprehensive middle school that is built to serve middle school students, both on the inside of the building and on the outside of the building. We want to continue to provide improved learning environment at Plaquemine High School. We want to make sure that we're taking care of the facilities that we have and improving them for what is the only high school that serves all of our students throughout the district. Again, we want to continue the work that we've done to enhance safety, security, and technology district-wide, as that's ever changing. And then we want to make sure that we're balancing our transitions from elementary to middle school to high school. So Dr. Harris is going to talk a little bit more in detail about each project specifically.
Thank you, Dr. Wright. Good evening, everyone. We have continued to work with our design team to refine our design on these projects. And so we're going to share with you really at a high level the overall conceptual design, and we have some sample site plans and renderings we'll share with you. There's still a lot of work to be done, but certainly can provide at least an overview of what is being planned and what is being designed currently. So the new middle school, as Dr. Reich mentioned, at 152 and Platte Purchase roughly, is being designed for anywhere between 500 to 600 students, with the ability to expand up to 800 students eventually over time. It's approximately 93,000 square feet and would be a comprehensive middle school that would support all of our 6th through 8th grade curriculum, our 4 core areas, also all of our electives, your foreign language, art, music, PE, technology. Would have classrooms for our gifted program, also for intervention needs for students, all of our special education space, and then some flex theater space. And I'll share what that looks like here in a few minutes. Also has a space for a track, for an athletic field, a football field, soccer field, and a track. And so that this site would also support all of our programs, grades 6 through 8, from the academic side to the extracurricular side as well. If the bond issue does pass, it is expected to be completed and open for students by the fall of 2023. This slide is an updated slide from showing you the overall site. This is very similar to what you've seen in the past, but we've made some adaptations to this based on the work with our civil engineers and our architect firm. And so essentially the site we're master planning this site for not only a new middle school, but also eventually a second high school when our enrollment demonstrates the need for that facility. In this particular program, on this bond issue, it would be the area that's outlined here on the east side of this site, which would be the new middle school, again, the athletic field, all of the parking, outdoor classrooms, and a bus lot as well to house our buses. And then eventually, as you can see on the shaded area, would be the second high school and all the athletic amenities to support that program. This is an 86-acre site, and this particular bond program has 31 acres that would be used for the middle school and the site amenities that are shown on this particular slide. We now have a draft of a floor plan as we continue to work with our architects to, again, refine that design. This is a floor plan. Now, keep in mind, we have a lot of work to do. So there could be some adjustments and changes over time to this floor plan, but at least we have a conceptual plan at this point that includes, it includes a 2-story portion of the building. As you can see that up above, that line that says level 2 would be above the lower story. So the building is designed in neighborhoods. So you'd have a neighborhood for 6th grade, a neighborhood for 7th grade, a neighborhood for 8th grade. So the 2-story would accommodate 2 neighborhoods. And then the 1-story would accommodate the other grade level neighborhood. And those would be on the west side of that particular building. You can see the outdoor classrooms. All of the core space of this particular building, it would be designed to accommodate the full build out. But you can see the future expansion on the left side would be the addition of the future classrooms, which would be able to increase the capacity up to 800 students. And then you can also see a future auxiliary gym being master planned in this particular facility. This building then on the east side shows the gymnasium. It shows the band room, choir room, also the flex performance space. So we'll share what that looks like here in a few minutes, but that's all being master planned in this particular design. So this is just a general overview of the massing of the building. We obviously don't have colors selected yet or exterior materials. So this would, the building would look very different than this, but really this just is to show you the overall massing of the building. You can see the 2-story classroom addition. You can see the 1-story classroom addition. Then down the middle is the media center. And then on the far side would be all of the performance space. So your gymnasium, your choir, band, flex performance space, all those areas would be included in this design. So keep in mind, this is not what the colors are going to be in the building. It's going to have very bright, vibrant colors. It's going to have great materials, but we're still working through those with our designers. So, but we wanted to show you just the overall massing of the building. This is our middle school visioning process. And so when you kind of look at all the different components, again, we're talking about what the core classrooms and the collaboration space will look like, the exploratory classrooms, the fine arts classrooms, commons and media center, gymnasium and performing arts, outdoor learning space. So this slide really just shows you the exercise that we're going through with our staff. And we'll continue to refine the design itself, but all those components make up a comprehensive middle school program. We've showed these slides on previous presentations, and that gives you an idea of some exterior sample renderings. These are all facilities that have been designed by Hollis & Miller architect firm. That's the architect firm that's working on this particular design. So you have an idea, you know, earlier I just showed you the general massing of the building without any of the exterior materials. This gives you an idea what some of those materials may look like as we go through and finalize the design. You can see Walden Middle School in the Park Hill School District. We see one in a couple from KCK School District, one in Edmond, Oklahoma, one in Ozark, Missouri. And then the next slide is sample interior rendering. So as we continue to refine the design, you get an idea of what some of the classroom space could look like, the collaboration space. We talked about those neighborhoods. So you would have a 6th grade neighborhood, 7th grade neighborhood, and 8th grade neighborhood. They would all have some form of collaboration space that you see on that that second picture on the top. Gives you an idea of when classrooms would be able to come together to work on projects and have some collaboration space to do that. It has commons, our secured entries for safety and security, outdoor learning space, certainly our gymnasium, media center, some of our exploratory learning. And then the bottom left is a sample of that performing arts, that flex theater or flex performing arts space that we're referring to. So this is a sample that we are using as the basis of our design. And this would be included in the design of our building as we move forward. The next slide really talks about the phase 1 rebuild of our Platte County High School. The rebuild, so if you actually go to our website and look under the frequently asked questions section, there's a really good description of the history of our current high school and how, you know, the original building on the north end was built in 1963. As the district grew, additional classrooms were added. There was a middle school that was built that sit just to the right next to the high school. As the district continued to grow, those two buildings were connected together. As we grew some more buildings more classrooms were added to those buildings. And then as we continue to grow, we took over Paxton, which just sits to the south of the current Platte County High School. And Paxton is not connected, so students have to go back and forth outdoors to get to that space. But it's been kind of a piecemeal approach that has served us well for a number of years. But this approach is more of a comprehensive high school rebuild that moves all that into one facility that not only improves our infrastructure, you know, as we had our architects and go through the infrastructure of the building, we certainly have areas of the building that are newer and nicer. We have areas that have some significant needs from upgrades to your electrical, plumbing, heating and cooling, all the things that kind of make up the infrastructure or the guts of a building. But we also wanted to identify ways to improve the learning space as well. So our architects and engineers worked together to design a plan that made a lot of sense, that we would do it in a phased approach. So it allowed us to keep students and staff in their current classrooms and not have to relocate during the construction. And then eventually over time, as that building builds out, we can start the deconstruction of the current older part of our facility. If all phases were approved, the only existing part of the current high school would be Wilson Auditorium. That would remain. Everything else would be rebuilt around it. But again, that would be over multiple phases that would have to be approved by our voters through each phase. So this particular bond program is just phase one. It includes 26 classrooms. It has, in those rooms, it has science labs, computer labs, group study rooms. It does have a competition gym, weight room, a health classroom, new cafeteria and commons. Right now, our students are served from 2 different cafeterias and 2 kitchens, one in the north end of the high school, one in Paxton. So this would provide some efficiency in services by bringing those together. It also would improve a lot of the parking and the traffic flow around our campus, and would also then build a new baseball field. And the reason the new baseball field gets built is because that would be the current baseball field is the location where phase one rebuild would occur if this is approved by the voters. So the next slide shows that site that I was referring to. So you can see phase one is in the lighter orange. Phase one would be what would be included in this particular bond package. And you can see it sits over the top of our current baseball field. So we would relocate that field, rebuild that field, build phase one. The current high school would remain. But then eventually, if the voters were to consider and approve phase two and phase three, we would come back and build the rest of those that are in the darker orange on this particular slide. So this gives you a site view of the plan. You can see the added parking, traffic flow. We're separating bus traffic from vehicle traffic to make it a kind of overall better flow throughout the site, and improve our parking for the high school and all the other amenities that surround the school. This is a rendering that would show the south side of the new addition. You can see the 2-story classroom wing on the left side. This is the bus loop. It would be where buses would pick up and drop off. So again, separating the bus loop from the vehicle traffic is an important part of our improvement to this facility. You can also see to the right is kind of that faded out, transparent portion of this building. That's because that would be future phase. That's where the existing high school sits. So only the area to the left of that would be in phase one. And then future phases to be considered by the voters would finish that building out and replace our existing high school facility. This rendering is the north side of phase one. It is a 2-story. You can see on the upper left, we would have a new kitchen and cafeteria area. as you move to the right, the upper level, the windows over there would be the weight room. On the other side of the weight room would be the new gymnasium as well. There's a main competition gym and an auxiliary gym that sit together right there. It includes all the locker rooms. It includes a health classroom and all the amenities that would support that space. This rendering is an interior rendering that provides the view looking really from the cafeteria. This would be the new Commons cafeteria area, looking north out of the windows towards the stadium. To the left are glass windows that would look into the gymnasium. The entry into the gymnasium comes at an upper level with a jogging track that surrounds the gym. And so this would again consolidate our services to allow kids to have one commons, one cafeteria area, and one kitchen area. This slide here provides a view of the inside of the classroom wing looking west. You can see the classrooms with collaboration breakout spaces in some of the corridor areas. These spaces are all designed to bring in significant daylight and to improve those areas for our students and staff. This slide is another interior rendering showing the Learning Commons looking towards the Project Lead the Way classroom on the far side. This view would be seen walking in off the bus loop on the south side of this particular building. This bond program also includes improvements to Berry and Pathfinder. Berry and Pathfinder, so currently Pathfinder is a K4 building, Berry is a 5.8 building. So with these improvements, you would now have Berry and Pathfinder both serving K5, and all of our elementaries would be K5. We would then feed into two middle schools, comprehensive middle schools, 6 through 8 buildings, and then eventually into our one high school, 9 through 12. So it would clean up our feeder system. The improvements to Berry and Pathfinder have a lot of site improvements. We would be making some improvements to playgrounds, outdoor learning space, parking, traffic patterns. We would do some interior modifications to Berry Elementary, or to Berry to convert it to an elementary, and some furniture upgrades as well. If the bond issue is passed, we would have this building ready for the fall of 2023. And if the bond issue is approved, we would go through a boundary study process to determine boundary lines for all of our elementary schools and the 2 middle schools. This slide shows the site work improvements to Berry and Pathfinder. So if you look at the dark shaded areas in the parking lot, they describe either new or improved parking and traffic patterns. The green and purple areas on the map show the new playground. We would have a new playground built on the south side of Pathfinder to serve the Pathfinder students. And then we would upgrade the playground on the north side of Pathfinder to serve Berry elementary students. Both have outdoor learning space and improve site flow so that we have, again, bus traffic and vehicle traffic can flow more efficiently through the site. Also part of this bond program are overall safety security upgrades and technology improvements. We've got a safety security master plan that we've been implementing over the last several years, things like access control, video surveillance, classroom lockdown hardware, intercoms, emergency notification systems, and improved technology infrastructure. That's all. We want to continue to implement those and make sure that we have safe facilities for our students, and also make sure that we have the infrastructure to support expanding our technology throughout the district over time as well. So that's really a high-level overview of the projects. I would say this is a balanced program that provides capacity relief for the elementary level. It provides high quality middle school, a brand new middle school that would have two comprehensive 6th through 8th grade middle schools that would also support all of the academic and extracurricular, co-curricular programs. And it also starts working towards improving and rebuilding the current high school. So that's the overview. I'll turn it back over to Dr. Reich for a few comments, and then we'll open it up for some questions from you.
Thank you, Dr. Harris. Yeah, I want to make a few comments and then we're going to get to your questions. I think we have about 6 or 7 questions in the chat, and Laura will be moderating those questions. But I want to start by saying, the elephant in the room, whenever we have done these informational meetings and other meetings I've been across the community, the elephant in the room is the South High School, and when is the South High School coming? And so I want to try to address that here to start, and then we'll get to the questions. So our enrollment is simply too small to necessitate 2 high schools at this time. When you look at other high schools in the state, or other school districts, excuse me, in the state that have 2 high schools, they're significantly larger than we are. One exception being St. Charles, they're 5,000 students. The K-12 roughly were 4,300, so we are smaller. But that's a district that has gotten smaller over the last 2 decades. They were much larger at one time, and that is a district that has a tax base that is almost twice as big as ours. And so that's the other barrier to a second high school at this time. And much discussion has been had about the cost of construction, which is a concern, but the bigger concern in thinking about a second high school in a district with only 4,300 students and a tax base of 600 million is the fact that we couldn't afford to operate 2 high schools. So we would be duplicating services across 2 buildings to do that well before we have an established need. And we have estimated that that would require somewhere in the neighborhood of an $80 to a $1 tax levy increase. And we do not believe that that is politically viable, nor do we believe that it's in the best interest of our students. Because ultimately, if we were to split into 2 high schools at this time, what that would mean is it would cost more to our taxpayers, but it would also diminish service. We would not be able to have the extensive course offerings, the advanced placement, dual credit, many of the extra and co-curricular activities. We have those things in our one high school now because we have economies of scale. When we split into 2, it diminishes the economies of scale and makes it more costly. And so, I want to share that first and foremost. But secondly, the prospect of this bond program not passing. Ultimately, if we are not able to, at this time, build a middle school on the property that we have acquired, we would fail to take care of the equity issues at our middle level. And we feel like it's important and the time is right for that. And we have the enrollment and the tax base. Secondly, we would fail to provide additional elementary school space because our middle schoolers would, on the south end of the district, would need to remain at Berry. And then also, because we only have 1 high school at this time that serves all of our students, we would fail to improve the quality of our high school for students, whether they live north, south, east, or west. And so I want to be clear and address the elephant in the room to start with. Those are really the major considerations when it comes to the second high school. And so some of you have asked some questions about a second high school, and I'm just going to answer those as we cover them. And so I'm going to turn it back over to Laura to moderate.
Sure. First question, if approved, at what percentage approximately of our bonding ability would our district be when all of these projects are completed?
I'll take this. We would be at 15% bonding capacity. So we would be maxing out our bonding capacity, which is something that we did. I'm going to go back to back in time to days before I was a decision maker in the district, although I was in the district at the time as a building administrator. So we maxed out our bonding capacity in 2004. We did it again in 2007 with Pathfinder. We did it again in 2008 with improvements to Berry and Seacrest. And then we hit the Great Recession and we didn't do a lot for a while. When we went to the voters in 2015 and approved a tax levy increase, we had about 15 million available in bonding capacity at that time, not enough to cover the project at Compass Elementary and the high school. And so we were at 15 million at that time, and here we are roughly 6 years later, and we have the ability to to bond 73 million. So the good news is that, well, first of all, growing school districts do this. You know, Platte County, Green Valley, Wentzville, Liberty, we are constantly up against our bonding capacity limitation, and that will be our reality for the foreseeable future. But the good news is that we recover bonding capacity quickly. And that is because we are a growing district, not only enrollment, but we are also a growing district in terms of our tax base. So as our tax base grows, we add additional bonding capacity. We also add bonding capacity by retiring debt. And so we do that. We can afford to make our payments, and we make our payments on time. But we also accelerate debt repayment. In fact, we just finalized an accelerated payment. It's called a defeasance, where we retired 3.5 million in debt before it was due. So those kind of things help us rebuild our bonding capacity. That has been our reality historically, and we are projecting that that will continue to be the case.
Next question. Can you tell us what the estimated soft costs and design costs are for each project separately? High school versus middle school estimated soft and design costs.
Mm-hmm. Well, I will tell you that the estimated soft costs are contingent upon the construction cost when the project is bid. So I'll describe the overall budget that we have for each project from the construction cost, and then you can account for anywhere between 17 to 20% added on to that for your soft costs and design fees. And so our estimated construction cost for the middle school are between $29 and $30 million. Again, we have to continue to finalize the design, and then these projects will be bid. So once they're bid out, then we'll be able to know more. We have a budget for now, but we'll be able to know those costs more specifically when they're bid out. The first phase of the rebuild is between 44 to 46 million. We're estimating about 45 million right now for first phase, 3 to 4 million for the Berry and Pathfinder construction costs, and $1 million for the district-wide upgrades. So the soft costs are a percentage of those construction costs, and also fees associated with inspections and testing. So the soft costs you can estimate between 17 to 20% added on to that construction cost. And again, that would be depending on where those hard construction costs, when they came in after they were bid. So hopefully that gives you just a general idea of the overall cost of each project.
When would we be looking at finishing the additional phases of the high school? And when, based on current growth, would we build a high school in the south end of the district? Probably Jay could answer both those, but Mike chime in.
Yeah, I'll take a shot at it first. And you know what I'll say is that it's a difficult question to answer. We can certainly speculate, but you know, it would be our goal to take care of the next phase of the North High School as soon as we can. But there are so many factors that go into when. First of all, as bonding capacity allows, we are restricted by our bonding capacity calculations. And then it's difficult to be precise as many factors influence that timeline. So things like growth in our tax base, things like prospective development. Many of you may or may not be aware that there is just as an example of prospective development that kind of changes things rapidly. There's an 1,800 home development that is going through the process of approval with the city of Kansas City that would build out on the east side of Tiffany Greens. So that's a large, substantial development that could change some timelines. There's also a prospective data center that would be one of the largest data centers in the United States that is proposed partially in our district, about half in our district, half in Smithville. And the assessed value of this data center is tremendous. And so that would be a game changer. Also repaying our debt as scheduled, and then also how much accelerated debt repayment plays a factor. So, you know, it would be our goal to look at a next phase sometime within the next 5 years, but we're doing this responsibly. So we want to make sure that we're we have the ability to take care of the next phase. We want to make sure we have the bonding capacity, and we would like to do it in a no tax increase scenario. That's always our intent. That's our starting place. And so, and then in terms of the future high school, the same considerations ring true. I've seen some speculation that that because we are using bonding capacity for our existing high school, that we would not be able to build a second high school for, I've seen things 18 to 20 years or more. And, you know, the reality is I can no more tell you exactly when that second high school will be built. No more than somebody can speculate that it won't be built within 18 to 20 years, because there are so many factors that come into play. So what I will say to finish that question is that our district is growing. The number of commercial inquiries that I've been a part of in terms of commercial property development over the last 2 years has been, you know, staggering, to be honest. It would be the envy of most school districts. So, you know, we can tell you what our projections say today, but there are several factors that go into looking into the future, you know, outside of 5 years that we just have to continue to monitor.
I think this next question has already been answered about the future of the second high school on the donated property. Next question, will the STEM improvements include improved and planned spaces for robotics competition, fields, and larger lab space?
Yeah, thank you for that question. One of the things I failed to mention earlier, we have career pathways that will be supported by this new and improved space. We have business management and technology. That right now, an example of that class would be marketing and entrepreneurship. We have engineering and technology. So a class in that particular career pathway is Project Lead the Way. We have health services that supports our biomed program. And we have human services that would be culinary and textile. So part of the improvement of the high school rebuild would also support those career pathways. And yes, to answer the question specifically, we are designing Project Lead the Way with also a space for their arena, space for their ability to build their you know, the robots and all the things they do for that program that's being designed. We also support that at the middle school level. So we would also be making sure we have the connection. We have Project Lead the Way courses at the middle school. So having space there for lab space and arena space for that program as well. So part of these improvements at the middle school and high school will support our career pathways, and they definitely will provide for much better lab space than what we have currently in those facilities.
All right, next question is about the high school. So between phase 1 completion and the completion of the future phases, would we be using part of the existing high school? Do we know how much of that high school would need to be utilized after phase 1 is completed?
Yes, we would be. And of course, we would have to continue to use that facility through construction. So, you know, when you think of an 18-month to 24-month construction schedule, so if phase 1 is approved, we begin construction this summer on the rebuild. We essentially would be rebuilding kind of a standalone facility that sits just on the west side of the current building, where the baseball field sits. And then at the end of phase 1, connect it to our current building. So we would be using all of the current high school during that construction phase, because we would keep them in their space. And then once we could start moving courses into the new facility, you know, I would say that we would still be needing, you know, easily a good 2/3 of that building for a key classroom space. But we're also, when we think about phasing some of these classrooms, we have to, when we get into phase 2 and phase 3, we're going to have to utilize Paxton for some of our programs so that we can start deconstructing some of the areas of the current high school, and as we move into the new phase. So all that space would be utilized now and be utilized even in the future, so that we can phase in the rest of that work. So that's really kind of where we stand with that currently.
Next question is about Pathfinder and Berry. Has there been any thought into making Pathfinder and Berry splitting the K-5 grade levels instead of each housing K-5?
I'll take this. Yeah, we get that question a lot. You know, the kind of the idea of having a K2 in one building and a 3-5 in the other. And we opted to, we actually did that in part of our district at one time. And I'll first say that if we didn't think that we were going to grow more, that might be a viable solution. But we know we're going to continue to grow. And so when you split into those grade span attendance centers, K2, 3, 5, you know, the question comes, okay, what happens when we need a third elementary school on the south end of the district? Do we go to K1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then, you know, eventually, you know, where do you go from there? And so where we've arrived as a district, and this was done through a task force, engaging our parents and our stakeholders, we opted to move to a K-5 feeder system. And there's lots of benefits, and I won't go into that too deep tonight, but I'll give you a couple of high-level overviews. First of all, arrival and dismissal can be very challenging for a K2, 3, 5 scenario. So we would need to stagger the arrival and dismissal times in those two buildings because parents would have kids in both buildings potentially, right? So if you have a second grader in one building and then a fourth grader in the other building, what that ends up being, for example, for a car rider, a parent may sit in car rider line for, and I know some of our parents sit in car rider lines a lot longer than I would, but you know, 20, 30 minutes in one line, then they would go from that building and that drop off to the next building to spend 20 to 30 minutes in that drop off line. And so it's not very convenient for parents to have that K2, 3, 5 split because of logistical issues like that. We also like having kindergarten through fifth graders together because we're able to utilize, we have more of a wide span of instructional materials in that building that help our students kindergarten through fifth grade. And then we also want to have, in a K-5 scenario, we're able to build relationships with kids and families over a 6-year period of time rather than a 3-year period of time. And so, you know, that definitely helps when you're able to build those relationships. And you know, kids are in the same building for 6 years, so they have that familiarity with the physical plant. They have familiarity with other adults in the building, and that's helpful for our elementary age students as well. And then again, going back to the K2, 3, 5, that introduces a transition in our kids' elementary years. And then if we were to need to split again, K1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then we're introducing another transition from physical plants. So we've just determined that a K-5 scenario is best. And if you have any concern about them being next door to each other, it goes pretty well. And there are examples of this throughout the metro. In fact, the two elementary schools in Platte City are relatively close. They're not next door, but they're pretty close. So this can be done, and we feel it's optimal for our elementary age students.
Next question, can you please speak to specific efforts to ensure equity and access for your Berry-based students and families? Are we assessing participation with an equity audit and working to ensure inclusion? And what specific commitments and efforts are happening or planned?
I'll speak to that on a high level. We are working on a strategic plan right now with a third-party consultant, Sophic Solution. And in crafting that strategic plan, we are engaging a parent stakeholder group for equity and inclusion, and then also a staff equity and inclusion group. And so that is in draft form right now. I believe it will go back to both the parent and the staff committees before it ultimately goes for the board. I believe the board would like to do a first read and then approve that plan. But we're doing things already to address equity and access. And I'd like to, Dr. Harris has been really instrumental since he joined us in the district in working through the tryout process for our extra and co-curricular activities. So Dr. Harris, you want to speak to that in a little more detail?
Yeah, well, I will share that from a facility standpoint. I mean, what we really see as a benefit in this new middle school is the fact that we will have 2 comprehensive middle schools that can support all programs, academic, co-curricular, and extracurricular. So some of the limitations that Barry provided as a long-term solution for a middle school is that it didn't have the ability to have the site amenities to support your extracurricular programs, your athletic fields, your track. And so our students now, having a comprehensive middle school, will have access to all those programs on their school site without having to be shuttled to a different school. So we think this will improve certainly access to programs for kids and provide those opportunities right there at their particular school. I'll also say we want to continue the great work that Dr. Jones at the high school and Dr. Haniger has begun with working together to ensure all kids have a smooth transition from middle school to high school, and they understand what to expect, and they understand what it will be like, and we make that transition as smooth as possible and make sure that students have access to every, the knowledge to know what it's going to take to be successful, and make sure we have a very welcoming environment for all kids. So you may have seen some of that work over the last several months. We're going to continue that work as part of that plan that Dr. Reich alluded to. But that I wanted to also share kind of from a facility standpoint, we'll have high quality middle schools, both north end, south end of the district, all the site amenities that will allow more opportunities for kids to participate right there in their local school.
Has the Twin Creeks development plan for several new housing communities on the south end been considered with enrollment numbers, and how would that impact?
Let me start to answer that, and then I'll let Dr. Harris finish because he understands how projections are done a little bit better than I do. That's his area of expertise. So first, let me say this. I have been a part of just talking with developers on planning Twin Creeks since I took over as superintendent 12 years ago. So, well before, generally speaking, well before the public is aware of these developments, I'm at the table months and even years in advance of that public knowledge. I want to say that's in large part because we have an economic development community in the Northland that wants to make sure that schools are at the table early. And so I have been a part of those discussions throughout. So yes, we're very, very much in tune with what the prospective development is and will be in the near future. So Dr. Harris, why don't you talk a little bit more about how we factored those prospective developments into our enrollment projections?
Yeah, we actually have our most recent enrollment projections on our website. It's I think they're listed as enrollment projections from 2020. We will continue to do those every other year. One of the things in a growing school district is you want to stay on top of development changes and adjustments on a regular basis, because what our projections show us today, as some of these housing developments accelerate from what they had originally planned, we need to be on top of that so we know the impact it will have on our students. And so those projections also have, they come with a yield rate from every household. And so feel free if you ever want to take a look at how those work. Our current projections, the facilities we are planning in this bond issue will certainly address the needs that we have immediately at the elementary level, will certainly allow us opportunities to expand at the middle school level and provide us the adequate space at the high school level for several years, a number of years. But as the development that you're referring to was included and was part of that overall plan, you can find that in that forecast. But we also know there's another development that's being considered that has 1,800 homes over the next 10 years. We're in those conversations with the city and in those conversations with economic development folks. So certainly if these things come to fruition, we may need to accelerate our need to build, future facilities sooner than what we may be thinking of today. And that's why we need to stay on top of that on a regular basis. And so the current forecast was taken into consideration on this current plan, but we will continue to monitor that. I do think the development of this site at 152 and plat purchase with the middle school and the site amenities. I think if the Northland Soccer Complex comes into fruition, that's being proposed by the city of Kansas City, I think the other development that's in that area, it certainly could accelerate some of that housing. And if it does, then we need to be able to adjust to it. And of course, it also brings a improved tax base as well to be able to support the future facilities and the revenue to operate those facilities.
Are plans for new Pathfinder playground taking into account any issues that were present when the building was expanded for the latest classroom edition in 2015-16? If I remember correctly, there was some issue that made them unable to place it there.
Yeah, the issue was building a playground across the little creek into the green space that sits on the south end of Pathfinder. So yeah, it has taken this into consideration. So we've actually reconfigured the design to put it next to the building, so we didn't have to cross that area. But you're absolutely right. The previous plan ran into a problem because we hit rock on the area that was proposed to expand the playground, and was going to create a lot of challenges for us. We've actually moved away. It also was kind of far away from the building, and we had to get access to it. So that was going to take some time just getting kids there. We actually have moved that closer to the building, and so we have a much improved plan. But we'll continue to work with our designers to do all the proper prep work to make sure we're in good shape. But this plan certainly will avoid the pitfalls that we had from trying to build where we had considered it in 2015.
Okay, next question. We need extra curricular activities south, so kids and parents are not always having to drive all the way to Platte City. What is planned where this is concerned? How can we make this better?
Yeah, so this particular program provides that for the middle school. So the new middle school being proposed would be a comprehensive middle school supporting all of our, again, academic, co-curricular, and extracurricular programs right there on site. So that's why you see that the football field that's there on the site, the track that's there. It would have all the lab classrooms that would support the curriculum. So we would have a comprehensive middle school that allows for that, so that students that attended middle school there would not have to be shuttled to participate in extracurriculars.
And then second part of this person's question, why can't the new Berry Middle School actually be a South High School and put 8th graders in a portion of the school for the South students? There is a lot of building going on in the South area. This seems to be the most logical and would reduce transportation costs.
I can take a stab at that, Jay. I kind of addressed this earlier when I talked about operating costs. A South High School with an enrollment of 1,300 students at the high school level, and even considering projections, we're some time off of the ability to afford the operating costs associated with the second high school at this time. Sure, in terms of proximity and convenience, it makes sense. But there are other considerations that we have to take into consideration. And that is, the ability to pay, not only construct the building, but to operate that building. When I say operate, I'm talking about, paying teachers, custodians. A lot of it is personnel costs. And when we're talking about, and this kind of answers the next question too, Laura, but when we're talking about operating 2 high schools, it's unlike any other consideration at other levels in the district. So we have the enrollment that justifies operating 2 middle schools. But when you're talking about operating 2 middle schools, you're talking about operating 2 schools that have a relatively narrow scope of course offerings and programs compared to our high school. Our high school has a comprehensive offerings from AP, dual credit, pre-engineering, biomedicine, and then, all of the host of extra and co-curricular activities that go along with a high school, experience. And so because of the breadth and depth of our high school programming, operating two high schools before you have a justifiable need in terms of enrollment and the tax base, it's extremely expensive, and we would be reducing the economies of scale that we are experiencing right now. So that's why, and that is also why we are able to build a second middle school and pay for the operating costs, because we have the justifiable enrollment and the tax base necessary to do that, A. But B, we're not talking about building two schools that have the comprehensive programs that our high schools have. And keep in mind that much of what we offer in our high school is not only serving the needs of or the wants of our students and parents, but it's also satisfying requirements by the state. So I think I kind of answered two questions in one there, Laura.
Next question for you, Dr. Reich. If the bond is not approved, is there a plan to make necessary improvements?
Yeah, I mean, we're not going to stop improving the school district if if this bond program isn't successful. What we will do is we will work with a citizens advisory committee that will be assembled, and we will assess what our needs are. We'll go through. Essentially, we'll go through a process that we've already gone through to try to repackage, and it could result in no changes. It could result in significant changes, but I'll kind of answer that question where I started. We still will have no greater ability to operate a second high school because our tax base isn't big enough and our enrollment does not justify at this time. The tax base will be there at some point in the future, and our enrollment will be justified at some point in the future. But we'll have to take a look as a community, engage our stakeholders, and figure out where we go next.
Jay, this is probably for you. How much will the additional phases of the high school rebuild cost?
The budget estimate for the total build out is 85 to 95 million. And that's projected to be over multiple phases. And again, as Dr. Reich mentioned earlier, that's contingent upon, again, our assessed valuation, our tax base, and as our enrollment dictates, but our ability to fund that and operate that. Our goal is to be able to provide, come back and ask the voters for, again, a no tax levy increase, a bond issue to support that. But the overall build out to be done over multiple phases would be between 85 and 95 million.
And you probably can take this next one, since you have experience with boundary line processes. How do you draw enrollment lines when schools are right next to each other?
Yeah, absolutely. We go through a process to determine how to create boundary lines and based on the capacity of our current buildings. But drawing boundaries with schools that are closer together are actually a little bit easier than if they're spread apart across different areas in the district. And I say that because the distance of travel for transportation is the same because you're coming to a similar campus. We would have to identify, again, based on the number of spaces available in every building. And so what would be the appropriate boundaries? We also want to leave space in those buildings to grow into. But yeah, boundary lines, we'll go through that process. Very similar to the boundaries that we have between Compass Elementary and Segrist. They're very close together as well, but we have boundaries that determine which kids go to each facility. It would be very similar to that for having two K-5 buildings next to each other at Berry and Pathfinder.
All right, next question. Can you help me understand where the main growth is in our tax base, north, south, east, or west? And is that a concern in regards to redistrict lines? Is there a threat that the southern part of the district become part of Park Hill and North Kansas City due to housing projections?
Yeah, I'll take that question. So our main growth is, and I've come to understand that different people characterize different parts of the district with different directions. So, I'm going to say our growth is happening in the Fountain Hills area. Our growth, I'm not going to do this by north, south, east, or west. I will tell you where the growth is, and our listeners can determine what part of the district they believe that is in. So Fountain Hills is growing and will continue to grow. We also, as someone mentioned, the Twin Creeks area, as we develop the soccer field, and as the district, if successful next Tuesday, we develop the middle school, there would be some ancillary residential development around that development. I mentioned the Tiffany development, the 1,800 homes east of Tiffany, and let me also mention that we're just having these conversations now, and when development is proposed, it's usually a good 5 to 7 years before we actually see homes coming out of the ground. So a little caveat there. And so those are the main growth areas south, or I think those are areas that generally people would characterize as south or southeast. The other areas of growth in the district would be primarily the N Highway corridor, which is in the northern attendance area. That would be Copper Ridge, Seven Bridges. Seven Bridges is probably our largest development, our largest master plan community. I've had some people suggest that that's not south. It is north of KCI. Those families do go to the Northern Attendance Center, and Seven Bridges is 5 minutes from Platte County High School. So that's an area of much growth. We have some more activity in Running Horse, not much more there. Development east of Platte City across I-29. I forget the name of that development. Laura, you might.
Wind Creek Farms.
Windmill Creek, I think.
Yeah.
You helped me, Laura. Thank you. Yeah, so that's a development that's taking off. We actually have some significant development in Tracy, which is the same developer as the Windmill Creek. So we're developing, in terms of residential growth, we are developing both north and south. There's no question about that. So the second part of the question is there a threat that the southern part of the district become part of Park Hill or North Kansas City due to housing projections? And I would say no, there's no real threat of that. That is possible, but that would require a vote to occur in both districts. So if, let's just say, Park Hill were to have interest in taking on part of the south end of the district in an area where they share a boundary with the district, that would go to a vote in that district and to a vote in our district. And it would have to pass in both districts. If it passed in one, it didn't in the other, the boundary lines wouldn't change. So, I'll say this, external boundary lines do not change very often. In fact, it's probably been some time before we've seen any substantial exterior boundary lines changed in the state of Missouri. There may be some very rare exception out in rural Missouri, but I'm not aware of any in the metropolitan area that have happened in modern times.
All right, and the last question that I have so far, feel free to keep typing in your questions, is why are we not starting with building the middle school first or concurrently versus the high school, since the more urgent need is at the middle school?
I'll start. Jay, you can certainly chime in.
Yeah.
The reason why is because our long-range facility task force identified all of the projects that are in this bond program as priority. We went through, Jay, help me, 12 or 13 iterations of a bond program before we landed on this one.
Yeah, I think option 11 was the actual
Okay,
final
thank
one.
you.
Yeah.
So we went through 11 different scenarios, and this was the package that garnered the most support. And it didn't just garner support by members that are In the North, it didn't just garner support by members in the South, nor the East or West. We had representation across the district, and I can't tell you that every single person on that task force loved the finished product, but that's what consensus building is all about. We put everything on the table, and we determined where our greatest needs were in the district. So we are one district. We are one Platte County R3 school district. And if you go to any of our activities, you go to any of our band competitions, if you go to any of our football games or robotics competitions, you can't tell me by looking at our students where those students live in our district, because they're all wearing black and orange and they're all proud to be Pirates. And so we are working to make sure that we're addressing our most significant needs. Where the greatest need is, and that's certainly a matter of one's opinion, but that we're proposing the bond program because it came directly from the task force.
And I think, Dr. Reich, I think the question that, as I read it, is the construction schedule. So
Okay, yep, I did misunderstand.
I'll make reference to that. But these buildings, the projects will be built concurrently. The high school project has an accelerated schedule by a few months because of the timing of site and utility relocations. And so we have to try to make sure that we can do that over the summer months to not disrupt the school year, especially when we're doing utility relocates. We have to shut off part of the building to do that. And that all has a short timeline, so we can do that over the summer, so that when kids come back in the fall, they're not being interrupted by the construction schedule. The middle school is a greenfield site, so we're master planning that site so that when we do the site work, we can put ourselves in a position that we are prepared to master plan that entire site. So although we're developing 31 acres in phase one, we want to make sure that what we do balances that site from when we start moving dirt around and bringing site utilities to the location, so that we're prepared that at some point in time doing the rest of that site, we have the utilities close by to connect to. We have the site in a position that we can complete that design and complete that construction schedule. So they will be built concurrently. All projects, with the exception of the high school, has got a little bit of an accelerated schedule because of the need to do some utility relocations and not wanting to disrupt the school year to do that. But again, the high school is projected to be done in December of 22, and then the middle school and the other projects to be open in the fall of 23. And so but again, they'll all be under construction at the same time, with a few months advance on the high school to address the utility relocations.
Thanks for picking me up there. Good teamwork, Jay. I did miss that question, so.
Sure, no problem.
I don't have any other questions right now in the chat.
Well, with no other questions, I want to thank everybody for giving us your time tonight. Thank you for the questions, excellent questions. And I'll end by saying this is our last informational presentation, but if you have questions at any time, do not hesitate to contact us at the district office. We are happy to answer any questions and have done so throughout this informational campaign. So again, this is our last informational session, and so we will see what the outcome is next Tuesday, and then certainly communicate accordingly. So again, thank you for the gift of your time. Got my light shutting off on me, so I guess that means it's time to go. But I really appreciate your time this evening. You're very busy people, so thank you so much. Have a good evening.
Thanks, everybody.